On Monday, in a surprise move, 7 countries announced the severing of diplomatic ties with the Gulf state of Qatar. Additionally, several states have blocked Al-Jazeera, the Qatari-backed television news channel. The countries cutting ties say that Qatar is promoting terrorism and division, while Qatar says it is the victim of lies, smears and dirty tricks designed to undermine its reputation and hurt its relationship with the United States of America. To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Ambassador Hua Liming, former Chinese ambassador to Iran, and Anna Tangen, author and columnist. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. But before we get started, let's look at this.
A tiny oil and gas-rich country whose size belies its significance. The freezing out of Qatar by key Arab neighbours who claim it's supporting terror groups is a global problem, not just regional. China's business ties with Qatar include building infrastructure for the 2022 World Cup. And Beijing wants diplomacy to prevail.
China hopes the relevant countries can properly resolve differences through dialogue and consultation so as to safeguard unity and promote regional peace and stability.
The US is another strategic ally of Qatar's, and it's arguably in a trickier situation. US President Donald Trump blames Iran for fostering instability across the Middle East with support for a number of radical Shiite Muslim groups. And that stance has helped him forge alliances with leading Sunni countries like Saudi Arabia and even Israel. The problem for the Trump administration is that Qatar supports Iran, and Qatar is a key partner for the US right now. 10,000 US troops are stationed in Qatar, and they're crucial for Trump's highest overseas priority, defeating ISIL. US officials don't see this tangible sign of support being compromised by the Qatar crisis.
I do not expect that this will have any significant impact, if any impact at all, on the unified fight against terrorism in the region.
Trump described his relationship with Qatar's leader as extremely good. He will need to ensure it stays that way to avoid this diplomatic crisis escalating. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Now, gentlemen, what do you make of the dramatic latest development in the Gulf? Do you think the GCC is likely to fall apart?
GCC really is facing the crisis because now the solidarity or the union between the GCC countries now is facing big problems. GCC was founded in 1981 when the war between Iran and Iraq broke, and the 6 GCC countries was united against Iran. But after 20 years, after 30 years, I think things changed in the Gulf countries. And first of all, Saudi Arabia has been very much weakened by the low prices, and with the US-Saudi relations turned to a new area. So the Gulf GCC members, especially Qatar, since 1995, the new leader came to power in Qatar. Qatar became a quite ambitious member of GCC. They are not satisfied just to be lackey of Saudi Arabia. They want some independence. This political independence, the biggest sign is their relation with Iran. Qatar is not ready to have very hostile relations with Iran as Saudi Arabia has. So Qatar has been successfully kept their friendly relations with Iran, which Saudi Arabia has been not so happy with that.
What do you think of the attempt by Qatar to be more independent in terms of the foreign policy, and what do you think of the division and disputes between and among the member states of GCC? What do you think of the future of GCC?
All right, well, that's a lot of questions. Let's get to the first one. This is a tiny country. They see themselves more like the Switzerland of that
or Singapore
area.
in Asia,
Singapore,
in
yeah.
ASEAN.
They're trying to develop their own things. They have a tremendous amount of money. We're talking about average. The GDP per person is over 148,000 US dollars. That's per person. So you're talking about things. It's a tiny country, less than about 2.6 million people. And they're in a very difficult position because their largest source of revenue is a shared gas field with Iran. And this is why they are always on the fence on this issue. If they go sideways with Iran, they risk losing their production there. But I think there are more sinister things going forward than simply the collapse of the Gulf Cooperation Council, and that is you have troops massing from Saudi Arabia on the border. Why would this be significant? Well, Qatar only has a little less than 12,000 troops. The U.S. has 10,000 alone at their single airbase there. So this could be extremely tricky situation if Saudi Arabia, who would stand to gain. So let's tick off what they would get. Gas and oil prices would go up immediately. They would get access to the third largest reserves in the world of oil and gas. A tremendous amount of money that's locked up there. So there's a tremendous number of advantages. Now coming...
currently, fluctuations in oil prices is not very impressive, only 50.
That's what the market is saying now, because
people
people cannot believe that this would be serious. But the fact is, with troops massing on the border, with the timing, with Donald Trump's recent trip to Saudi Arabia, his demonization of Iran, his desire to strike out, you not only take out the whole situation in this country, but you would also Iran's ability to get gas out.
But
so you would be cutting them in.
What do you make of the bluff by Saudi Arabia, which failed to even crush the rebellion on its doorstep in Yemen, which is of course yet another proxy war? Do you think Qatar is likely to take Saudi Arabia very seriously? You cannot even defeat small troubles in Yemen. How could you amass troops along our border here?
Yes, you're right. Saudi Arabia used to be considered a powerful country, a big power in Persian Gulf, in the Middle East. And I think the Yemen war has been a very good test for Saudi Arabia military capability. And Saudi Arabia's poor performance in Yemen war has shown his brothers, these countries, that their big brother, I mean Saudi Arabia, is not so capable for military forces. So this is one of the reasons that some of the GCC countries has been not so, has been encouraged to have some differences with Saudi Arabia.
I'm afraid at this moment the most interesting issue is how far can Qatar go in improving its relationship with Iran, which is a Shiite state, whilst Qatar is a Sunni state. Now, what happens since the end of the Cold War is the increasing sectarian violence between Shiites and Sunnis in the Middle East. Israel is very happy because it's been left marginalized. And that's their happiness. They are very happy about being left marginalized. This time around, Qatar seems to have broken the vicious cycle of sectarian violence by getting close to the arch rival of Saudi Arabia. I mean, I'm a little bit confused as to why.
You're right. Qatar and Iran, they are not from the same sectarian of Islam. One is Sunni, the other is Shia. So I don't believe that the Qatar and the Iranian relation will be very close or very sincere between themselves. And still, I'm sure this relation is a relation of convenience. And for Qatar, I think Iran, at the same time, they are sharing one of the biggest oil gas field in the Persian Gulf. And Iran, I think, in the eyes of Qataris, Iran is a big political leverage for them. This is leverage for them to claim their independence from Saudi Arabia. They are not ready to be just a lackey of Saudi Arabia. They want to be a country recognized as have the global influence. For instance, they have their TV station, the Al-Jazeera. They have been the host of Asian Games, and they will be the host of 2022 World Cup football, soccer. So this shows the Qatar doesn't want to be just dependence of Saudi Arabia, and their relation with Iran will be very convenient.
Well, Anna, do you think Qatar was actually well prepared for this sharp decline in its relationship with other member states of GCC? Because they could not afford to be isolated completely in terms of food supply and other things.
40% of their daily food comes from Saudi Arabia. They're not prepared for this, and quite frankly, no one was prepared for this. This is what's so strange. Why 7 countries, basically on really no basis, have said we're cutting off. And not only get your diplomats out, get your people out, right? This is very, very strange action. Can anybody tell me what the fuse was that went off that it lit up this situation? No one can. There were some email leaks. Actually, they were against the UAE and a lot of things that the UAE ambassador was saying bad about Trump and some other things, and colluding with the Israelis. It's really very little. And there's one allegation that the current monarch said something, all right, but he says, he denies it. He's asked the FBI to come in and investigate it, opened up the doors. They have dialed back on everything. They are not taking a arrogant or strident position in return to this. In fact, they've said, listen, we just want to get along. They were taken completely by surprise. But this could be the next proxy war, because if Saudi Arabia, whether or not you believe that their armies can do this, if they amass there, the only thing that the Iranians can do is start massing and preparing troops, because they cannot lose that oil and gas field. That's too much of their disposable hard currency.
Well, the growing military presence of the Saudis might just be yet another sign of brinksmanship between the brothers and sisters of the GCC. Let me cross over to Hussein Ismail, Chief Executive Officer of the China Today magazine in the Middle East branch, Doha. Okay, as one of the 7 nations who cuts the tie with Qatar, Egypt had been through some chaotic years, including the time when President Morsi was in charge. He was supported by the Muslim Brotherhood. What role do you think did Qatar played during Morsi administration, and is that linked to Egypt's decision this Monday? How do you think Qatar may respond to these 7 nations in the future? Hello, Hussein.
Hello. I think this crisis is not new. It's an old crisis coming back. It was in 2013, 2014, if you remember, 3 countries of the Gulf withdrew their ambassadors from Doha. There was a change. After that, there was a change at the top of the state in Qatar. A new emir has come, and they tried to resolve the crisis. They made promises, but after a few years, the crisis has come back, because in Saudi Arabia and the Arab Emirates, they think that as these promises have not been fulfilled, the situation has gotten worse than ever, and particularly with the continual attacks of Al-Jazeera on Egypt. Now, in Egypt, those people, the Saudi and the Emirati had made a lot of investments to help the regime, the new regime of Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. They don't want this regime, they don't want Egypt to be turned into a failed state. Nobody has interest to see Egypt turn into a failed state, including Qatar. That's why in Qatar itself today there was a declaration from the Minister of Foreign Affairs saying that we are open to dialogue, we are open to negotiation. Nothing is out of negotiation. We can negotiate everything. And I think this crisis may develop, if it develops more for the worst, because everybody will lose. Even the United States of America, it is not in its interest that this crisis continue, because it disturbs its own plans to fight ISIS and to fight also the Shiite militia that Mr. Trump has singled out recently in the summit of Riyadh.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Hisham Karoui instead of Hussein Ismail. He's a non-resident senior fellow with the Center of China and Globalization. Ambassador Hua, on the surface of the issue, the catalyst for the current diplomatic tensions between Qatar and Saudi Arabia was the positive position that the Qatari government holds about Iran, arch rival of Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. But what about its support for Muslim Brotherhood that was once in charge through the Arab Revolution but was overthrown by General Sisi, who is currently president of Egypt through election?
Yes, Qatar has been the main supporter of Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East. We remember in 2011 when demonstrations against Hosni Mubarak in Cairo, in Egypt, happened. I think Qatar has mobilized all in its capability, especially financing the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and he strongly supported the Morsi, who became the president of Egypt. That's why one of the reasons that Egypt this time has been very active in cutting relations with Qatar. And all, Muslim Brotherhood is a cross-nation organization all over Middle East, especially in Arab countries. So Qatar has been the main supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, and actually they are competing with those Muslim organizations or the military forces in Syria that were fighting against Bashar al-Assad. They have their influences all over the Arab countries, especially over Hamas in Palestine.
But I've read many media reports from the West which say the Islamic radicalism or radicalized Islamic ideology has been actually exported by both Muslim Brotherhood and some of the forces, religious forces in Saudi Arabia. When we come back, we'll examine these and other issues. You are watching Dialogue with Ambassador Hua Liming and Mr. Anna Tungan. We're discussing the latest dramatic development in Qatar, which is facing diplomatic isolation after the latest quarrel about Iran. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, what do you think of the history of Muslim Brotherhood? Today, we see radical anti-West sentiments pervasive in the Middle East. Al-Jazeera, Muslim Brotherhood, it's an issue of ideology. You see the lone wolf attacks in some of the big European countries, Germany, France, and Britain. So let's briefly review the history of an ideology that has been radicalized since the end of the Cold War.
Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 80 years before. It's quite a historical one. And when it is founded, it has been quite radical, but not as fanatical as the QI and ISIS. Even during the Hosni Mubarak's presidency, there were some of the Muslim Brotherhood, Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, they were elected as members of the assembly of the parliament, and they had peaceful demonstration against the Egyptian government. But they have the same thing. They, like QI and like ISIS, they ask for divine rule instead of secular governments like Turkey or in other countries. The Muslim Brotherhood, relatively they have good relations with Shia, especially with Iran. So that's why Qatar has good relations with Iran and is not ready to cut relations with Iran to follow Saudi Arabia. And they are competing with each other with the Wahhabists in Saudi Arabia. So this is the main differences, religious differences between Muslim Brotherhood and Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia.
What do you think of the political movement of Muslim Brotherhood? Because the apparent sign of politicizing the Islamic movement as an ideology threatens to destabilize old European countries, I mean Britain, France, and Germany. Do you think this is a major concern for Washington, whose attitude towards Qatar will make a sea difference in the near future between member states of the GCC? Don't you think so, Anna?
Well, of course, Washington's concerned. The question is how much they're involved. But when you start talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, people have to understand they're not like ISL. They're much more intent on controlling within the Middle East. They are a pan-Sunni movement that says that everything should be brought under one caliphate. They share in terms of ideological goals, the same as ISIS, Islamic State, and Al-Qaeda, but they are not as outgoing in terms of spreading terror to other places. But that does not mean that they are a benign entity. There are obviously a lot of complex movements going on. When you see Shia states aligning with Sunni states, this is going to be a big issue. And this is what people don't understand. When a lot of people understand just how many cross currents there are within the Middle East based on tribal, different religious perspectives, and also worldviews in terms of pan-Arabic versus existing monarchies.
Thank you so much. Let me go to Hussein Ismail, the Egyptian correspondent of China Today, based in Egypt. Hello, Hussein, long time no see. What do you make of the latest development? Are you surprised by the dramatic decline in the diplomatic relations between Cairo and Qatar?
It's not surprising. This step was expected for a long time. Qatar used to play a very destructive role in Egypt through different means by supporting extremists around the country and especially terrorists in Sinai, using its media arm, Al-Jazeera, to demonize Egypt. They never, in Qatar, they never missed a chance to try to make harm to Egypt, not only to Egypt, but also to other Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Libya. And this policy and this attitude from the Qatari monarch actually was refused, and there were demands for the Egyptian government for a long time to cut the relations with Qatar, but Egypt preferred to take this step after consultation and after practicing the most patience possible to convince the Qatari leadership to keep away of intervening in the internal affairs of Egypt and other Arab countries.
That somehow Egypt is a victim in all of this stuff. I don't think that Qatar was forcing Erdogan to lock up all these protesters or journalists or anything else. I mean, I fail to see it. Isn't there? Why is this happening at this point? You seem to be saying that Egypt has been patient. What has broke the camel's back? And why are 7 countries in alignment on this? Why are troops massing at the border? And what does Egypt have to gain if there is, in fact, an armed confrontation or takeover of Qatar?
Hussein?
Yes. Actually, I didn't hear clearly what was said, but I would say that Egypt has suffered so much from the Qatari policies during not only during the last 2 or 3 years. This is from 1990s. Qatar is a model of taking its thing and its opposite. a model of contradiction. Qatar is keeping good relations with Israel and with Iran in the same time. Qatar is hosting Al-Udeid American base, military base in Doha, and keeping contacts and coordination with Iran. Qatar is taking a different policy from its neighbors, its Arab neighbors, members of the
Thank you so much, Hussein Ismail, for being with us. Time is running out, but the last question for Anna. You've been guest speaker of Al-Jazeera many times.
Yes.
What do you make of representation of Al-Jazeera in terms of the Middle East issues, the Middle East peace process?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of self-censorship that goes into any kind of national. I am not employed by them on an independent commentator, much like on this program. I think the English channel is quite a bit different from the Arabic channel, and I think that's recognized. Unfortunately, not always. There was an unfortunate incident in one country where they arrested the wrong people. In terms of where they're going with this, I think they're shell-shocked at the moment. They don't know exactly what all of this means. You can tell that by the fact that the populace is making a run to buy food and water in anything they can. There's huge price rises. People are very concerned. I am concerned simply because whether more bloodshed in the Middle East is the last thing that we need. We have Kurds. We have this situation. We have Israel. We have things. This is not the way it should go.
Well, the last question for you, Ambassador Hua Liming. What do you make of the future of Iran, the Persian state, which has a long history of very brilliant civilization, and what Qatar wants, and which has triggered the current outbreak of hostility, hostile relationship between Qatar and other member states of GCC, is its support of Iran being one major player in forging whatever security scenario or framework in the Middle East. What do you think of the role that Iran should play in stabilizing the region?
I don't think Iran is so ambitious about their relations with Qatar. Iran expecting the relation with Qatar to be the model of the Iran relation with Syria, with Iraq. But Iran is trying very hard to have the to widen the differences between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, at least to the GCC, which is resistance against Iran, could be weakened by the one of the members who has differences with Saudi Arabia.
We're going to watch out and try to figure out what will happen in the near future, right after President Donald Trump wrapped up its official visit, the first of its kind that took him to Saudi Arabia. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.